For centuries, a battle has been raging between humans and the largest reptile in the United States, the American alligator. Every year, they attack several of us, and we kill thousands of them in retaliation. But it's when gators move into human spaces that the conflict gets really dangerous for both sides. Today, we're taking this fight into our own hands, literally, to see if we can find a way for us all to coexist. The American alligator is without a doubt one of the most dangerous animals in the country. Not only do they attack a number of people every year, but they're the only reptile in the US that has ever actually eaten a person. Many top predators have been wiped out from most of the country for records like this, but alligators are different. There are over 5 million of them found across the Southeast, more than the global populations of bears, wolves, and mountain lions combined. And living alongside these reptiles every day are over 50 million people. When humans and gators clash, it almost always ends tragically for one side. But today, our job is to work on a better solution. My name is Harrison, and this is Evan. We're twin brothers on a mission to help you become an insider in the natural world. And a critical part of that is breaking down the conflicts that exist between humans and our most feared wildlife, so we can figure out how to coexist safely. That can be challenging with alligators, because a person could easily lose a limb or even their life in an attack. And the deadly consequences go both ways. See, if an alligator is even perceived as a threat to humans, they get labeled as a nuisance animal, a designation that means they're deemed too dangerous to be released into the wild, and by law, they must be killed by a contractor. The only way to prevent this conflict is to catch and relocate potential problem gators before they become a nuisance. And while that's easier said than done, luckily, we know a guy. This is Zachary Gray, our longtime friend who has been working with alligators for most of his life. He's conducted many gator rescues in his time, and today we have the unique chance to join him. Because while filming together in southern Louisiana, Zach got a call from a concerned homeowner that they have a bit of a gator problem.
All right, we are on call running to get a 3-foot gator, approximately 3 foot, but it's hanging around in pretty urban area, urban culvert. It doesn't surprise me where it's at. Kind of hopped off of the river and into these people's neighborhood when we got all this heavy rain. Little ditches and gator habitat. The gator habitat is back there, but when all this floods, because this is a floodplain, gators move in. It almost works like a nursery for anything under 6 foot. Hopefully this goes perfectly smoothly. We'll get him first shot, get him relocated, and all's well that ends well.
Yeah, this job wasn't gonna be that simple. The gator we were after wasn't there in the morning, so we set a few traps around the property and came back that night to check them. Ideally, we would have let the traps sit for longer, but we had a very limited window to do this relocation, so when the traps came up empty, we had to switch our strategy. We knew it was unlikely that the gator had left the area on its own, so the only method left to get it out of harm's way was to catch it ourselves, by hand. Now, we've been working with alligators for years, but this would be our first time hand catching them in the wild, so this job just got a lot more intense. Finding our target gator was now a challenge too, since all we could really do was drive around the neighborhood and use our flashlights to spot it or its tracks from the car. However, this strategy started working before we even started our first loop. As we made our way around the edge of the development, we saw a small gator dart across the road, and Harrison quickly jumped into action to catch it.
Got him. Got him. Look at that. Little gator. Not too big, but that is an American alligator. How big would you say he is? Maybe 2 feet? Yeah, two and a quarter. That is one cool little animal. This is something we have been waiting for a very long time. Our very first wild alligator in hand. I am very happy that our search paid off and we are going to be able to get this guy into some better habitat in just a little bit. But before we do, we want to take this rare opportunity to show you a wild alligator up close and talk a little bit about what these animals are doing out here. Because the more you know about them, the more easily you can navigate an encounter with any alligator safely. I can feel in my hands that he is solid muscle. He looks a little bit skinny, but when you you take a look at that thick, muscular tail, you can tell that he is getting plenty to eat. And the really interesting thing about an alligator like this is even though as reptiles in this area go, he's already pretty big, 2.5 feet or so, he is tiny compared to how big this species can actually grow. Male American alligators can reach up to 4.6 meters in length, and that's not even the record. They can get even bigger still. Alligators can get up to 500 kilograms as well over 1,000 pounds. So this is truly an impressive reptile, the largest reptile in Louisiana and one of the largest in the entire country. They're really only beaten by the American crocodile down in Florida. But this guy, despite not being full grown, still could cause some pretty significant damage if you handled him improperly. Absolutely. In that mouth are up to 80 razor sharp teeth, and he is not afraid to use them if he has to. They have an incredibly strong bite force, almost 3,000 pounds of force once they're fully grown. That's basically like the weight of a small car coming down on your hand, your arm, your leg. You do not want to get any part of your body near that mouth. Now, one thing I want to point out about this animal, as I'm holding him, I can feel how tough his skin is. It's incredibly thick and leathery, and under that skin, he has a layer of bony scutes called osteoderms. All of those little ridges along his body basically act as armor, and especially around his neck and on his back, you can feel they're incredibly tough. Almost nothing could penetrate the skin of an alligator, and once they reach full size, there is nothing that will be able to prey on this animal. Only a bigger alligator would be able to take down something of this size. So now that he's made it to this point, all he has to do is keep feeding, keep growing, and he will become the dominant predator out in this ecosystem. They're a nocturnal species, so at this time of night, he would be out hunting for all kinds of reptiles, amphibians, mammals, birds. Basically anything that can fit in his mouth could conceivably end up there. Now take a look at this animal's eyes. They have incredibly good night vision. It's one of the things that makes them such effective nocturnal hunters. And if we just gently press down on his eye there's something I want to point out. Aside from their regular eyelids, they have an additional membrane called a nictitating membrane that covers their eyes when they go underwater, and it essentially acts like a pair of goggles. It allows them to see underwater even in pretty murky conditions, and they're ambush hunters, so oftentimes you'll see them underneath the water with just their eyes sticking out. You can see his eyes and his nostrils there are positioned at the top of his head, so he can sit completely under the water, and any unsuspecting prey item that happens to wander by is gonna get snatched up in those incredible jaws. There he is. He's given us a little bit of a fight. Like a lot of crocodilians, if they find themselves in an uncomfortable situation like this, they'll sit and bide their time for a while, building up energy, and just when you think they've calmed down, they'll thrash out with that mouth or the tail, and they can deliver a pretty nasty whack or especially a bite. So we do have to be incredibly careful, even with a gator of this size. Absolutely. Now, we mentioned that alligators are primarily ambush hunters, but they will hunt actively as well, and they move through the water incredibly fluidly, and I actually want to show you how they're doing that. They do have webbed feet. It gives them good maneuverability underwater, but really when they want to move quickly or when they're swimming long distances, they're relying on that powerful rudder-like tail. You can see how flat it is, and it takes them so little effort to move through the water with that powerful appendage. Definitely one of his best assets. There he is. You're okay. Now, this animal, like we mentioned earlier, is solid muscle. So holding him this way is not doing him any harm whatsoever, but it's actually the best thing for him if he stays well away from people where we can't be a threat to him and he won't grow up to be a threat to us. Exactly. So with that being said, we're just gonna grab a few shots because this is such a special moment for both of us, and then we'll get him right back into a suitable environment where he belongs. All right, we're gonna get this little guy back because he is actually not the gator that we think the call came in for. This area looks pretty good. He's well away from people. Thanks for being a good sport about it, buddy. I know this wasn't fun. Go on. There he is. Right back in habitat where he belongs. All right, let's see if we can find that bigger one because I think there's still another larger gator that we're gonna need to relocate tonight.
Alligators are ancient animals. They've been surviving in the wetlands of the US virtually unchanged for over 8 million years. And when you have such a perfectly evolved predator living alongside humans, things are bound to get ugly. There are around 6 to 10 alligator attacks on humans per year, and significantly more on pets and livestock. Fortunately though, deaths are pretty rare. There are only 28 human fatalities on official record, and the estimated total number lands in the 30 to 40 range. However, the number of attacks has gone up in recent years, mainly due to increased human development of gator habitats, the rivers, lakes, swamps, and other freshwater bodies that people love to build around. Alligators are naturally food motivated and will investigate anything in their territory, so having humans in their proximity is what has led to so much conflict, especially with the nuisance animals that have lost their natural fear of people. Over 10,000 nuisance gators are killed every year, including around 3,000 from Louisiana alone. And that's on top of the over 24,000 alligators that are taken by hunters annually. This is why we have to step in here, because the only solution that doesn't end in violence is to relocate problem gators out of harm's way. The little one we found was on the outskirts of the development, and he was definitely not the one we got called for. So we decided to head back into the neighborhood to scan around the original property and see if any bigger gators were hanging around.
This is where one of the alligators was seen earlier today, and actually there's some evidence of that right here. That's a gator trail.
And it looks like it's probably like a foot and a half bigger than the one that we got a little bit up the road. Further back in here, there might be some bigger ones hanging out, but really the one that's causing more of the commotion, so to speak, is the one that's been going sitting right here. And I would estimate, looking at these little paths, maybe pushing 3.5 foot potentially. So that's about the gator size we're looking for. We're looking for a head about yay big, body about that big. And believe it or not, they can hide pretty well in these little ditches. So we're gonna give it a whirl.
Let's do it.
Alligators can fully conceal themselves even in just a few inches of water, so finding one in this maze of interconnected culverts is no easy feat. But this is when understanding gator behavior comes in handy. Alligators are creatures of habit, and once they find a territory they like, they tend to stay around that area. So rather than drive aimlessly around the neighborhood, our best bet was to loop the location where it was last seen. And after several unsuccessful passes, we noticed a fresh slide that led us right to our target. There was just one problem.
He's in the culvert right here. So we tracked him, had a slide heading this way, and sure enough, he's in here. It's gonna either be really funny or not fun.
For obvious reasons, reaching into the culvert to try to grab it wasn't an option, so the only way to get it to come out was to make a big commotion on one side of the tunnel and leave the other totally clear, with the hope that it would try to escape the disturbance where it thought it was safe. There was no guarantee that the gator would take the bait, but luckily for us, after just 10 minutes or so of staking out the culvert, we saw it move out into the ditch, and Evan got in position to make the catch.
Put some weight on. Good to go. Got him.
Nice.
All right. Wow, he is pretty big. Little over 3 foot, you reckon?
This is the gator we've been after. This is, I believe, is the one we were getting a call about this morning. We definitely want to get him out of here, away from the culvert, so he doesn't cause any more problems. But that is a beautiful animal. All right, let's get him back towards the car and we can get him into some better habitat. All right, now based on this guy's size, we believe that this is the individual that the original call came in for. This was the target of our relocation effort tonight. And looking at him, that makes sense because at this size, he could definitely pose a threat to any pets that are out. Dogs or cats could easily end up on the wrong side of this guy's jaws. And he is far from fully grown, but he is a pretty decent sized individual. Absolutely, you can tell just by looking at him that this is an older, stronger animal. He has a lot less of that yellow coloration that's indicative of younger alligators like the one we saw earlier. He has a fully jet black top side. That's what they're going to get as they get older. It helps them gain more heat from the sun as they're thermoregulating, and he is heated up and ready to hunt. That's probably what he was doing in the ditch where Evan just pulled him out. And that's really where the conflict starts with these animals. When they get to this size, they're not really a threat to people yet, but the reason the property owner called for this relocation is because they have dogs, and they're worried about an alligator of this size posing a threat to their pets.
This guy is too small to be a serious threat to humans, but alligators grow 20 to 30 centimeters per year until they hit maturity. So in just a year or two, he'll be big enough to take down any sort of pet. Once they hit 1.2 meters, 4 feet, they're large enough to be considered a nuisance, which can happen if a gator attacks a person or pet, becomes habituated to people and starts accepting food, or even just moves in too close to human development. And the thing is, if an alligator loses their fear of people and feels comfortable enough to approach them, they're not gonna grow out of that behavior. So you could end up with a 4-meter, over 13-foot alligator that will swim right up to you looking for a meal. That's actually why it's so important that we get these smaller gators out now. They're young enough that they haven't developed nuisance behaviors yet, so we need to get them into natural habitat before they have a chance to. This is a complex problem, but the next step in finding long-term solutions is to understand why gators would move into human areas in the first place, and what to do if you encounter one there.
I can tell just from the way he feels in my hands that this is a very healthy individual. He's incredibly thick. This tail is so meaty.
Should we show the full length?
Yeah, I think we should. If you want to take his neck there.
Buddy.
Now this is such a perfect individual that I just want to take a little bit of a look at those jaws. Will you show me those teeth, buddy? There it is. Look at that. This is an incredible animal. And it makes sense that he would come into an urban habitat like this because these little ditches are not only full of prey items, but there's basically nowhere for a lot of them to go. So it's essentially about as easy as going to a buffet for this guy. He can just cruise along, pick off any frog or fish or turtle that he wants with basically no competition. And it's small enough that the bigger alligators who would pose him a threat wouldn't be able to hang out there. This is a small alligator, not big enough to cause a fatality in humans, but they are definitely strong enough to cause serious injury. There is no reason ever to approach an American alligator in the wild, even one of this size. They are not a safe animal to interact with. They're not a safe animal to try and chase away on your own. If you do have an alligator on your property that you need to have removed, it's imperative that you call someone like Zach, who is licensed and trained to remove these animals safely. Now, luckily, Evan and I have spent many years working with alligators in the wild and in captivity. We understand their behavior, so we know that we can navigate this safely. But please, never attempt to do something like this. And something important to point out, yes, they're the apex predator in this ecosystem, but at this size, they do still have predators. Something like a human or a larger alligator would be just about the only things that pose him a threat, but he is feeling scared in this scenario. Now, what's funny is we actually kind of want him to be scared in this interaction, and let me explain what I mean by that. Alligators pose the biggest threat to people when they become desensitized to our presence. When they get too comfortable around us, and especially when they're comfortable enough to start approaching people, that is where things get really dicey for humans. So actually, by handling him like this while he's still relatively young, what we're trying to do is kind of instill a fear of people in him so that he doesn't want to interact with us. We really want him to never want to see another human again, because that will be safer for him and for us as he gets larger. Luckily, we are going to get him into a much more suitable habitat. We're going to take him well away from this neighborhood, somewhere where he can grow up as big as he can possibly get without posing a threat to people or any of their pets. And that is truly the best thing for him and for us. And that is what we are trying to achieve, to get them back into the wild so we can make sure that they can continue to serve the vital role that these animals play. This guy has been an incredible sport, but now it's time for the best part of any relocation, getting the animal back into the environment. So our water's edge is right here. I think he's kind of worn out from all that excitement, so he may not take off immediately, but there's the water. All right, buddy. Recoup your energy. Get back out there. Sweet. Whew, that was awesome.
We talk about the importance of coexisting with wildlife all the time on the channel, but there's arguably no species that it's more true of than alligators. As apex predators, they serve the essential function of controlling the populations of countless prey species, which maintains a healthy balance of consumers in the ecosystem. Their unique biology makes alligators basically irreplaceable, as there's no other large, generalist aquatic predator like them in their reign. range. Nothing else comes close to managing the number of prey species that they do in the number of places that they do it. We've already seen how damaging it can be to remove apex predators in other parts of the country, so it's not an exaggeration to say that this ecosystem couldn't exist without the work that alligators do. That's why it's so important that we find less destructive solutions to the human-alligator conflict, like relocating young gators before they have a chance to become nuisances. The more alligators that can be safely released instead of killed, the healthier the ecosystem will be, and that ultimately benefits both us and them. Human-animal conflict exists all over the world, and while in Ecuador last year we got to see it firsthand with one of South America's most feared snakes, the boa constrictor. To see how the interaction played out, check out this video, where we find one of these infamous snakes living on our friend's ranch. And with that, we hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.